Hi, everybody. I see Steve and I see Chuck. Is there anyone else there that I'm just not seeing? Hey, Chuck. Okay, I see. How you doing? Do we all have our tea?
I have mine.
Cheers.
I do too.
Needed this time of day, right?
At
Yeah.
least that's what I'm going to pretend is in my mug.
That's,
Hi,
I saw something where they said if you blow on it periodically, people will be totally convinced.
Good idea, Pam. Give people
It
some
wasn't
ideas.
an idea, but hey. We just had our conference yesterday. We have, conferences twice a year, and we've been doing them remotely for the past 2 years. And this was our first in-person conference. And I forgot how exhausting that is. It's exhausting. So anyway, if I seem a little sleepy or punchy, I can go either way. I apologize.
No apologies needed. Numoa just had a large conference. I was not at it, but Krishana certainly was, and I think that they're all probably in the same state of mind as you, Pam.
It's a lot of
We're
work.
still recovering from that.
Yeah. I heard it was great. We got a lot of comments, and please understand where this is coming from. We got a lot of comments saying, "Oh, your food is so much better than that food was." Yeah, people are so like.
I heard about that.
Yeah. Anyway, I understand how that goes, but
Hard to
No,
change
the food was subpar, let's just say that.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of thing you want people to be focused on. It should be a background thing, not a thing. Oh, well. Yeah, you got a lot of people coming in.
Great.
Krishana, I was thinking, or maybe Farah, I was thinking it might be nice to start with just a definition of equity. Would one of you be willing to just kind of start us off just by reminding us all what we mean when we talk about the term?
Yeah, Krishana, do you have a preference? I know, you've been a vocal advocate of sort of distinguishing between equity and environmental justice. Do you want to say something?
I'll let you, since you're the chair of the equity work group, I'll definitely let you take the lead on there, and I'll jump in if I have anything to add.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Melissa, you let me know when we're...
I think we're good to go. So we've got over 25 people and we're at 3:03. So I think we should get started. And I know that there will be some people trickling in after, especially in Washington, after their meetings end.
Right, great. So thank you all for coming, and I am looking forward to hearing from everybody because there's many people on this call who I don't know. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you all and learning about what you're all doing with respect to equity. I'm Pam Elias, and I'm with the Massachusetts Toxics with an S, Use Reduction Institute. It's one of those silly little things that everybody mistakes for obvious reasons. We did make up the word toxics, but we are quite adamant about that word, apparently. So I'm very happy to, have the opportunity to just kind of welcome you all to this conversation where we really are looking forward to hearing from the member states and other members about the activities that you have going on around equity and how that relates to your larger work of chemicals management and just understanding chemicals use in your own jurisdictions. So thanks. So Farah is going to talk to us about the IC2 survey that was done, and Farah has been doing a really remarkable job of facilitating and organizing our conversations around equity. And I've learned a lot, and I've really appreciated your perspective and your sort of very gentle guidance on the whole process. So Farah, take it away.
Thanks, Pam. Yeah, so before I share my slides, and Melissa, I'm not sure I can do that while your slides are being shared. I have some slides on the survey results. I will just kind of remind you of what we're sort of thinking of in terms of equity and how we're approaching that. So I'm actually just going to pull what we sort of had in the survey document as a description of how we're applying equity. And really, we're looking at the fairness and justice in life outcomes. So a lot of the work that we do is related to health outcomes, and recognizing that there are underserved and underrepresented groups in imbalanced conditions, and that resources and opportunities should be allocated appropriately to move towards those more equal outcomes. So that's kind of how we're thinking about equity. We apply that as a concept to processes that we're all involved in, policies and procedures that may help enhance and elevate equality, and maybe provide a platform for environmental justice. But we're distinguishing it here from environmental justice, which involves the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all groups of people. So that's kind of how we're approaching that when we say, an equity lens, or when we're talking about having an equity work group. I will start to just bring my slides up, but let me know if there are any comments on that before we start.
And I would just mention, feel free for everyone to use the chat with any comments or questions or resources to share with the group. I know that Carl at Metro had a great resource for some of Metro's work, a link, so he's going to share that at some point during the roundtable. But if other folks have anything they want to add, you can either raise your hand with the reactions button up at the top, or just drop it into the chat.
Okay, give me one more moment. I'm
You're
having
good.
trouble finding my
Yep,
PowerPoint.
listening in on this webinar, but no problem. Good. Okay.
Jean, did you, oh, there we go. Okay. I really do want to encourage people to feel free to chime in, but also if you're, not speaking, keeping yourselves on mute is helpful. Of course, there I was talking and on mute, so that doesn't help. There you go, Farah.
Okay.
Can you put it in like full slideshow view?
I will do that. Okay.
Excellent.
All right. So I'm going to spend just a 5 minutes or so talking about some of the results from a survey that we distributed back in the fall to IC2 members. And really, our goal there was to try to get a better sense of the equity work group is new. How can we best serve the organization? We want to be doing more work around equity and approaching that intentionally, but because IC2 is kind of unique in the way the organization operates and who it kind of serves, we want to be intentional about that. So we distributed a survey basically asking folks, how can we best serve you as a work group? What are you interested in? What do you need help with? What would you like to see? So I'm going to give some sort of higher level summary of some of the main takeaways from that survey. We had about 20 individuals report, but then in addition to that, 2 organizations submitted sort of a collective response for their organization or work group. So that captured more individuals. And we have a lot of data that, showed up in the written comments, more open-ended questions. And so my summary here is certainly not exhaustive. But I'll show you some of the things that we found here. We asked it, does your organization have a strategic plan around equity? 62% said yes. A few folks were unsure. And, a few we weren't sure about based on their answers. But good news is that a majority of folks do. So that's great. We asked, is your organization taking concrete actions to embed equity? And 77% said yes. So that's great to see as well. But there are certainly folks that, maybe are not really sure what's going on or didn't know how to answer that and maybe could use support from us. We asked, do you have professional goals, sort of on the personal or individual side to enhance your knowledge and tools around equity? A little bit less people were saying that, so maybe potentially seeing it as something their organization is doing, but maybe not as relevant in their opinion to their personal or individual professional goals. So we also collected a lot of open-ended response data, and we basically, one of the things that we were trying to gauge is how can our work group help organizations and individuals move forward with their work around equity, specifically as it relates to the type of work that we share in IC2. So to me, there were 5 really broad and general categories of interest that popped out from those survey responses. And actually, before I show you those, I want to just iterate, we really appreciate everyone engaging in the survey. And I want to also use this opportunity to share the results with you, but also kind of start a conversation around, well, what else is missing that we didn't capture here? And really just look at this survey as sort of the start of the conversation around equity and what the equity work group can do for IC2. So I please, I please want to open it up to, let's talk about this further in the roundtable and in other spaces as well. What are some other things that we can be looking at? But those 5 general categories were, looking at community engagement, best practices. There was a big emphasis on case studies and learning from other people, not with just in community engagement, but with equity work in general. Knowledge building around environmental justice or community impacts of toxics, integrating and applying equity principles into our work, data, tools, resources, and metrics that can maybe be shared or go on the web, and collaboration on policies and regulations that are relevant to, particularly relevant to impacts on marginalized and underserved communities. So these are some of the broad categories again here. So what's next? Well, one of the things that we really wanted to start with this year is be responsive to those comments that we got where they were really asking, hey, can we share more? Can we learn more from each other? So we're developing opportunities where folks can either drop into our equity work group meetings, and we'll have special sessions that focus on folks that are doing work around equity, kind of sharing their projects and findings or lessons learned from those projects. And Melissa or I will be, in touch with those opportunities. But we're developing some of those this year. And then we'll be going back to, some of the survey feedback and also, thinking about some of the stuff that we talk about today in the roundtable to further refine our strategic plan and goals based on your feedback. So that's kind of the high level summary there of our survey. And again, we really appreciate all of you that gave feedback on the survey and taking the time to really do that. It really helps us think about where we can go with this work group. And I'm really grateful for everybody that did do the survey.
Great, thanks. So before we move on, I wonder if anybody has any questions about what Farah has shared with us. Any clarification you're looking for? I see, Jonathan, that you asked a question about of the 20 people or the 20 individuals who responded, did they represent different organizations or not? And Melissa said she's going to look at that. I don't know, Farah, if you know off the top of your head.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number of organizations, but I suspect that would be at least 10 different organizations, I think. But I'd have to check about that. But
Okay.
We did have a fair number of folks, like different organizations responding.
Well, good question. Any other questions about the results that Farah shared or what we're looking to do next? Anything that was missed that you had hoped to see there? Great time to unmute yourselves and share.
Hey Farah, this is Emily Horton. Thanks so much for sharing the survey responses. I wanted to, maybe other people have this question for those who might be interested in joining some of our IC2 equity work group meetings when we might have, be sharing about our experiences. How can people, stay updated on there so they can know when they want to join or those specific meetings of interest potentially?
Yeah, that's a good question, Emily. Melissa, I may actually turn that to you. Would you suggest people notify us to get on our list? Would that be the easiest way to do that? We right now are meeting once a month, and Melissa, I also may ask you to help me. It's usually on a Thursday.
It's usually actually right now. This is the normal time of the month that the equity work group meets. So I have been starting to put the live link in the monthly IC2 bulletins that I sent out. So that's one way to just join right into a meeting. But if you'd like to be more involved and get any of the communications happening with the work group, just let me know and I'll add you to the email listserv that we have for the group. And that way you'll be automatically added to the meetings on the calendar. You'll get those invites. But it is once a month, this time of day, exactly on Thursdays, and we usually meet for an hour. So we decided to have this roundtable during that time so that we could make sure that we had as many of the folks that have been participating in the equity work group at today's meeting to present, but also just to answer any questions people have as well. So yeah, any and all are welcome.
Great. Thanks for asking that question, Emily. Yeah, we certainly, I mean, as with any IC2 work group, it's helpful to have more people there because we get more perspective and more ideas and more sharing happening. And that's the whole goal of these work groups that we host. So any other clarification questions before we move on? Okay, so we have 4 different organizations who have offered to kind of share what they're doing right now with respect to the question of equity. And so very grateful for each of you for being here and for being part of that. And Farah, we'll let you start and talk about what Oregon Metro is up to.
Great, thanks, Pam. I wanted to share a project at a really high level today. We are still sorting through our results, but this is a project that we're doing around toxic chemical products at affordable housing sites here in the Portland metro region. So this is a project that's funded by a grant from the Blue Green Alliance Foundation through the Bright Cities program of Healthy Babies, Bright Futures, which are an awesome resource. We are also doing this in collaboration with Oregon Environmental Council, which has done a lot of work in collaboration with us historically around toxics, and a nonprofit here called Trash for Peace. So basically what we did in this particular project, we surveyed folks at 3 different affordable housing communities around Portland. And we were really trying to understand what toxic chemicals are most widely used and contain at home in these affordable housing communities. And then we wanted to identify what products and product categories can be targeted in outreach that we have ongoing that will help minimize exposure to toxics for the household and particularly for children as well. And finally, we also really want to understand if we are trying to offer better services, particularly around household hazardous waste. What products could be considered high priority in terms of bringing collection services potentially on site to communities? Here in the Portland metro region, we have 2 hazardous waste facilities, and they are quite far for many people that are in Portland and around Portland, and it's also very hard to access them by public transportation, or if you have accessibility issues with public transportation. So that there's a lot that potentially impacts underserved communities that we want to consider. So yeah, again, we're really looking at kind of broadly understanding what are folks using in the home that are, potentially toxic chemical products, and how can we do outreach and provide services for them better. So we asked a few questions around, or more than a few questions around what products are in the home, but this is one particular question that we asked. And I also want to just caveat this with these are very preliminary results. I didn't do any of my own analysis here except pulling them from SurveyMonkey. So preliminary results, not quality controlled or final results yet. Anyways, looking at what cleaning products folks have, some things are popping out. A lot of people reported that they have bleach in their homes. Quite a few, have spot and stain removers, ammonia-based cleaners, and then we are able to see some of those other categories when we go into the data sets. So that's helpful when we're thinking about some of our outreach programs that target cleaners in the home and suggesting non-toxic alternatives. We also asked which automotive products are in your home. So because these are affordable housing communities, some folks, maybe don't have a garage there, and they maybe don't have automotive products. So we have a fair number of folks, almost half, that don't have automotive products. But those that do are reporting, things like motor oil, windshield wiper fluid, and others. And then we wanted to get a sense of what other products are in folks' home, and we had specific products that are kind of on our list of household hazardous waste that's pretty common. So a lot of folks are reporting things like batteries, light bulbs, but we included some personal care products like nail polish and nail polish remover, hairspray, which are often in aerosol cans, and pesticides. So that's actually really helpful in helping us think about what are some of the things that that we can target in terms of our outreach, and ensuring that there's proper disposal, but also reducing folks' exposure to those products while they're using them. And finally, we asked, are folks aware of the household hazardous waste facilities? And, we had almost 55% saying no, that they are not aware of the hazardous waste facilities, which likely means that many of those products are not getting disposed of properly, and are a potential concern for, the community and our waste stream. So, yeah, that's about all I have to share today. Those are some really preliminary results, but again, we're focusing on affordable housing communities here, and really thinking about how we can better serve these communities that haven't been as engaged, haven't had as much access, and haven't had as good services in the past, and trying to address some of those barriers.
Thanks, Farah. So you did this survey through SurveyMonkey?
Yes, we did.
And so I wonder, do you what percentage of the residents do you feel like you were able to get the attention of?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We were kind of relying on our community partners to really do the outreach about the survey. So we had, I think it was a little over 65 people answer the survey. And in the 3 communities that responded, there's probably almost 1,000 people that live in those communities, maybe even more than that. That number is not specific, but I would guess that's what it is. So, a rather low rate overall, but the times that we've engaged these communities, it can be hard to get participation rates up. So we were pretty happy to get, we were targeting at least 50.
Yeah, no, and absolutely no judgment on the number that you got. I'm just curious. And actually, to Steve's point, Steve asks, do you have any information on the demographics of the respondents? And I think that's a really great question. And kind of along with that, I wonder about who your partners were, and then and Emily asks, were there incentives for people to participate? So great questions.
Yeah, those are great questions. We did have a $50 gift certificate incentive for folks to participate, and I think over 10 or it was probably more like 15% of folks actually got gift certificates. So that was the incentive. We do have some demographic data. We asked some basic data. So the majority of folks that responded reported their ethnicity or race as white. And we did offer the survey in English and a Spanish version. So we also had some reporting that they identified as Hispanic, Latino, or Latinx. So those were sort of the 2 most common race ethnicity race or ethnicities reported. We also asked about how old, or if there were kids in the household and how old folks' kids were. The majority of folks that had kids, there were maybe about 40% of folks had kids. The majority of people that had kids, they were in the 11 to 15 years old range, and then some in the 5 to 10 years old, and less in the less than 5 years old. So, so we were hoping to maybe hit some people that had younger kids, because, you know, some of this outreach can be most relevant for folks that have young kids. But we'll be following up with broader outreach to these communities as well, be able to target some of those folks more intentionally.
Yeah, and yeah, as Steve says, and I agree, it's really interesting and important work that you guys are doing. And I think that what you're learning about what products are in those types of households, you know, that's information that our organizations might also be able to reference as we think about our own activities. So really helpful to have that. Any other questions? And again, folks, feel free to unmute yourselves and share your video and ask your question if you would like. Okay, well then, I think,
Hey, Pam, can I ask one more?
yes, you.
Hey, sorry, this is Trevor from King County. Are you gonna put this in a report, Farah, or how are you gonna disseminate it, or is it mainly an internal resource, or?
Yeah, we will be doing, well, we're required to we will do an internal report as well as a report to our funders. But this is something I can, you know, I can make a version of that available for IC2 folks as well. So I'll definitely be doing that. We have kind of a follow-up survey effort that's a little bit more intensive, that we're pairing with this. So I'll be putting more of that together over the coming months, probably 2 or 3 months down the line.
Yeah, because I mean, it's highly relevant to our program as well. And we're always struggling with like what is happening inside the home, especially amongst the communities that we want to be focusing our attention to. So could be very useful. And you know, I was going to say we should invite her to give a presentation, but if you probably don't want to present to thousands of local government groups. So yeah, thanks for telling us that you're going to be able to share that.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I will make a point of that, to share that with you all.
Yeah, a couple folks are in the chat, and Al's, you know, wondering about surveys. We're also trying to do some sort of, like, we call it marketing research, or at least our communications team does that, and only a small proportion will be dedicated to like actual product use. A lot of it's going to be trying to better understand, you know, certain communities and demographics and their understanding of our collection services and that kind of thing. But yeah, it would be interesting because it's so time and cost intensive to get that granular information. If especially with an equity lens in mind, if there couldn't be some sharing across you know, agencies and programs about this information. That's a great idea from Al and Farah for getting this conversation started. I'll shut up now.
Don't need to shut up. And lots of people weighing in on how useful this information would be for them, and that other work that other similar kinds of survey work that has been done. Why don't we move on and let's keep, you know, thinking about what materials are you working on or have you developed that others might be able to, you know, leverage for their own efforts towards, you know, really dealing with equity. So let's see, we do have I'm sorry, for some reason my chat was behind. So I just wanted to look, oh my goodness, I missed a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, I'm gonna move on because I missed a whole bunch of stuff and I can't catch up, which is great. You guys are asking a lot of good questions. Does anybody want to voice a question for Farah now before we move on, or? Yeah. All right, we'll take a look.
I just see one that is kind of, just to help you out. I just see one that's kind of specific to Farah, I think. From Gene Waters, it says, do you have a feel for which products you might target to get people to eliminate from their household?
Thanks, Trevor.
Oh yeah, thank you, Trevor. I'm trying to catch up with those too. Yeah, so what was definitely popping out to me is we already do outreach around cleaning products. And we've kind of had a sense that bleach is something that people are really tied to, but these data definitely drive that home for us. So I think that maybe just reminds us that sharing alternatives to bleach with people is going to be really helpful. The other thing that popped out to me is that right now, oftentimes our household hazardous waste, if they offer a community collection, a small scale community collection, they might do just sharps or needles, medications, and batteries, just those 3 items. And I think that it would be great if we can add some materials onto that. And when we asked folks about, things like hairspray and nail polish and nail remover, like a lot of people have those too. So I think that there are these items that we could add on to some of those collection events that would be relatively easy for our household hazardous waste staff to take, but potentially impactful for the community because they should be treated as hazardous waste. So that's what's coming to the top of my mind. I'll have some more ideas definitely in our reports.
Yeah, it's interesting to me whether, how much of those products end up being wasted versus being used. I mean, there's the choice, right, of choosing a product that is not a safer product. And then there's the question of are they being fully used or are they being disposed of, and how are they being disposed of, and what's the impact of that? Yeah. Cool. Why don't we move on then? This is really great intro to this whole discussion. So Chris Geiger, you were going to share what's going on in San Francisco.
Yes, thanks, Pam, and thanks, Farah. That's fascinating, and it really reminds me of. We did some work in affordable housing on behavior change. I mean, in choosing safer cleaning products a few years back, and maybe we can talk offline about that. Huge challenge, and number one, bleach is the cheapest thing out there, cheaper than bottled water, and hard to talk people out of it sometimes. So, thank you. So, realizing that we only had 5 minutes, I just pulled a couple slides together, and this is what I'm going to talk about is quite a bit different, and it's really hard to cover in 5 minutes, but I'll make an effort. I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Hold on a second. There, I think. Can you see my screen now?
Yep, we see it, Chris.
Okay, good. So I'm going to talk about a project. It's actually a series of projects we've had going in San Francisco's affordable housing developments, starting, well, back in 2014, but really earlier than that. And this is about pest management in affordable housing. And, that means it's really not, it's not about product substitution. It's way more complicated than that. Pest management is not just substituting a safer product for another product. there's a whole lot else that goes into that. In fact, we've been asked to, make lists of safer products for institutional contracts, and I just don't think that that's the right way to do it. I think it's all about having the right professionals who know how to do these, perform these services. So I'll try to make this quick. So the equity component with affordable housing really traces to the structure of the housing authorities in the U.S., which have, maybe a lot of you have experienced this, but they have been rolling disasters for decades. This is an easy thing for budgets to get cut on at the federal level, and they have consistently been cut over the years, and which means that there are often, usually, inadequate budgets for things like pest management. But it also means, because of the way they're structured, there's no equity that can be borrowed against to do renovations in public housing authorities, typically. And that meant we had hundreds of backlogs of hundreds of work orders dating back months and years sometimes in our housing authority in San Francisco. See if I can make this work. Ta-da! There are some very big health inequities, especially in public housing relating to pest management. And I'm thinking primarily about asthma here. And it's been very well documented that and this is a map of San Francisco, and the red area is these are actually the lower income parts of the city, and the asthma hospitalization rates have always, this is very old data, but they've always been much higher than the other neighborhoods. Asthma is a very common syndrome, and it's one of the big health challenges that we have, if you judge by the number of people going to the hospital and whose lives are changed by this. So asthma is not just caused by pesticides. There are some pesticides that can have a role in causing asthma. They are caused by pests and poor pest management. And really, so our project was about good pest management. The city, what you're looking at here, I won't do the guessing game, but these are not coffee grounds. This is cockroach poop, cockroach frass on someone's countertop. It was a unit that was empty for 2 weeks. And there are so many cockroaches in there. I have lots of these gross out photos. I could really ruin your lunch. But the conditions in the public housing were absolutely abominable. I mean, unbelievable that people were being asked to live in some of these units. It was eye-opening, shocking. And the roots of the problem were in budgets, actually. People did not have budget to do good pest management, long-term pest management contracting, to do the right prevention, to do the right techniques. In fact, they had to do usually month-to-month contracts, because for various reasons I won't go into, which just is setting yourself up for failure. And that means people come in and spray, and it looks like there's a success, but there's not. This resulted, also the other big problem was that these buildings were very substandard, in need of repairs, lots of holes and places, holes for pests to get into and places for pests to hide. Back around 2013, I think, the whole system was redone in San Francisco. They sort of basically got rid of the Public Housing Authority and put in nonprofit managed Section 8 housing instead, which allowed access to a lot of money and rebuilding, renovations of thousands of units. And I think it was I'm not neutral here, it was a huge success. We got in on this. I kind of got my slides out of order, but I do want to say the practices that were going on in these units, because the managers did not have the resources available to them that they needed or the expertise, some of them were actually distributing bug bombs to residents or spray cans of Raid. And a lot of residents were going out and buying cans of Raid. And just for the record, these are not effective pest controls. They're not effective at all. You can see a few dead bugs, but you're having a lot of exposure to chemicals that is unnecessary. And bug bombs actually can be a fire hazard too. What they should have been using are baits, for one. Baits are the accepted standard for effective pest control of cockroaches and ants, for example. But also, they should have been doing prevention. And we have a whole bunch of resources on how to build prevention into buildings so that you won't have the pests to start with. What we were able to do is we were at the right place at the right time. We had just finished these guidelines with a national committee on how to build pests out of buildings. And we hooked up with the Mayor's Office of Housing in San Francisco and talk them in to making this a requirement for the renovations. And along with it, a lot of training and a lot of interacting with the new property managers. So, I mean, there are a lot of situations. That little dark streak underneath the kitchen cupboard, that's where a rat has been going back and forth and back and forth. That's a rat rubbing. There are hidden areas under cabinets that are not accessible or cleanable. There are cracks, there are holes, there are lots of things that need to be done. These are cockroaches coming out of electrical outlets that could be blocked to prevent them from coming in. So we had, starting in 2014, 2015, we were able to work with the various developers, Mayor's Office of Housing, to install pest prevention of various sorts in almost 3,000 units of affordable housing, and also do trainings of property managers who were also very much in a bad situation, getting paid very little, being subject to a lot of abuse from understandably angry residents, and with very high turnover. So it was a huge challenge. It remains a huge challenge. What we have done this year and last year is we got a grant from the State Department of Pesticide Regulation, thank you DPR, to do a follow-up on this to see how things look in terms of pest populations and the degree of prevention that was installed. This is all preliminary data, but what you're seeing on the x-axis here is how well they built out pests. How good of a job did they do at pest prevention? So the higher numbers mean they did a better job on pest prevention. And on the y-axis, it's how much cockroach populations were reduced from before and after the renovation. And there's a significant trend there. And we're really happy to see this, especially since COVID came around right when we were starting this, and we thought, oh my gosh, everything's going to go to heck there because no one's able to even treat for pests now. So in any case, this is the gist of what we did. We also looked at individual measures that they took, for example, sealing radiator pipes to see the effect on, in this case, rodents. It seemed to have a significant effect on rodent populations to install these things. So this is not really maybe what you're used to hearing about in this group. It's not sort of product substitution, although there's a whole lot of trainings about why bug bombs are bad and why you should ditch your aerosol pesticides. But it's a much bigger thing, a bigger subject than that. This is our little crew. I felt very sorry for the intern, second from the right, because this is his first time out. He's a high school kid, and he was really grossed out by everything he'd been seeing. So anyway, that's what I have today, and we have all sorts of resources on this if anyone's interested, and we have a report coming out soon on it. So.
Thanks, Chris. And it is gross. I don't blame him. But also really important to see, really important to recognize that the idea of cockroaches is not like a single little critter. It's like this crazy infestation that can happen if left uncontrolled. So, and I'm really looking forward to seeing, your work, your reports, because I think that's, again, this is another great example of things that the rest of us can leverage as we try to work with different communities and, different groups. Any questions for Chris?
I have no idea how long that took. I think it was more than 5 minutes.
Oh, it was like 7,000 minutes, Chris. No, it's great. Jen, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add two things. First, that the work that Chris has done has been really, really amazing. And Chris is on his, last few hours perhaps of working with the San Francisco Department of the Environment. So if you do have questions and want to get more information about what he did, now is the time. And I want to thank him for his service, particularly to this community, because people in public housing have suffered in San Francisco for a very, very, very long time. And those pictures show what kind of suffering. And so the fact that we have many units that have been renovated with pest prevention designed in is a, is a tribute to him. He made this happen.
Thanks, Jen. But I will say one thing we didn't have to do was that much behavior change for residents. And that would have, we had some resident meetings with them, but that would be a huge, huge challenge. And when you really need to address these problems by the building and with a coordinated effort. So we'd love to have, we have tried to get the message out to, ditch the raid. But it's a complicated message.
Right.
One of the things that I'm hoping to do is carry forward some of this work by working with our Department of Building Inspection, so that as new, whether it's residences or commercial buildings get built, that there are checklists in place for improving design and just even small things like putting escutcheon plates behind pipes so that rats or whoever can't get in. Those kinds of simple things that could be done as part of an inspection checklist, and ensuring that there aren't gaps, et cetera. So, as to carry it forward beyond these renovations, but to all kinds of buildings in San Francisco. So if we can make that happen, maybe it'll be a model for others too.
Great. Diana, you had a question.
This is Diana from TSC, Sacramento. I just thought it was an interesting, very good job. I just remember, many years ago, I moved to a place in Sacramento, on a townhouse, and they had this infestation of, these bugs. It was just like impossible. They tried to do the detetization, all that stuff would not resolve. And then I thought, wait a minute, I work with source reduction. So I got rid of all the cans, all the food. It was a lot of very expensive, but that's the only way. They're gone. So it happened that it was in a co-op bag. Co-op bag had this bug thing, and that was what it was causing. So, for me, I'm like I just tell people, you see the results. It's no, you can, it's just like you said, the population was very good about it. If they see the result, there is no, why would you do that, right? So I'm like, this is my perfect example. I got rid of everything, even the cane stuff, but that's gone. I never had the same issue again. So source reduction, yeah.
Source reduction, great. Amen.
Thank you.
That's great. Any other questions for Chris? And Diana, thank you for raising your hand. That's modeling excellent, meeting behavior.
Yeah, we go for that here at DTSC. So we have our good meeting behaviors.
You're very well behaved there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, if there aren't any other follow-up questions for Chris, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to hear that you're leaving San Francisco, and I hope it's going to be because we're going to find you in other wonderful ways. We're going to miss you.
Well, thanks, Pam, and you will.
Good.
I'll be around.
Good.
I'm sorry that I have a 1 o'clock. I think Jenna has the same meeting.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us and sharing that information. We look forward to hearing more. Okay, well, why don't we move on then? We have Chris Green here with EPA's EJ Screen program, or to talk about the EJ Screen. Chris, are you here? Chris Green. Is he here, Melissa? Oh, you're on mute.
I don't actually see him in the list here.
Yeah, I was muted. I don't see him on the list, so I think we can go right over to Ray Eaton.
Okay, and I know that's
Apology.
Ray's here. I saw you join us, Ray. So thanks. Why don't we go ahead and hopefully we will get Chris to join us, but if not, we can bring him in another time. Yeah, Ray, why don't you tell us what Washington's got going on with respect to equity and the alternatives assessment? You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. Hopefully you all can hear me okay. Yeah, so I'm actually largely not here to talk about what ecology is specifically doing in equity. I will leave that up to the wonderful Emily Horton and Lauren Tamber at a later date because they are both doing a ton of great work with equity in some of our programs. But I'm here for a little bit of a different thing rather than a presentation. It's more of an announcement and hopefully a call to action for the IC2 members. Which is that currently Ecology is sort of supporting work at IC2 to update the IC2 Alternatives Assessment Guide. And one area that we are particularly interested in looking into is whether we can put things into that guide that are going to support more equitable alternatives assessments. So really embedding best practices that are going to promote like equitable considerations, both in terms of identifying chemicals of concern, but also incorporating equity into the actual work of identifying viable alternatives that can be used instead of chemicals or products of concern. So to that end, my sort of call to action for today is that we're really interested in finding out from member organizations about how they've been embedding equity in their own work, particularly any instances where you've been doing any sort of informed substitution work and trying to, get voices to the table and get them involved in decision making who maybe haven't historically had access. And particularly if you have anything that you think might represent a good case study, we'd really be interested in hearing about that work. And you can just reach out directly to me if you want to. And also if you're interested in getting involved with the actual work of, updating and revising the IC2 AA guide, please feel free to get in touch with me. But that's pretty much it for me. I don't need to share any slides or take up any more of our time, but I am happy to answer questions if folks have any.
And I would like to very much second Ray's call for action. It's exciting that we are, that we have somebody who's been given the authority to really focus some of her time on updating the IC2 guide for alternatives assessment and incorporating equity, social equity, environmental justice into the guidance is really exciting and important improvement. And as you say, Ray, the more we can learn from examples of what's worked well in other organizations and really incorporate that in, I think the better. So any questions or thoughts that you want to share with Ray? Okay.
This is Al. I would just say quickly, I'd love to hear from Lauren and others, Ray, about what they're doing on their outreach and what you think is we should know about that would be of use for us.
Yeah, not to put them on the spot, but I think we're hoping that I think there'll be more to share in the coming months. And I do see Emily did put in the chat that she'd be happy to provide an update on public comment survey campaign that they really spearheaded for the Safer Products for Washington program, which is one of our sort of informed substitution type projects. Emily, I don't know if that was an offer to do it right now, but I could pass it over to you if you want to talk about that.
Thanks, right. Would this work for Melissa, Pamela, everyone? Is it okay to give an update, or are we all trying to
I
get
think
into it?
that's great. The next thing that we wanted to do was to do just kind of a roundtable sharing. So why don't we think of this as you kicking that portion of the discussion off? Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. Hey everyone, Emily Horton here. I just want to acknowledge that I really appreciate this kind of roundtable focused on equity and everyone who's made this happen and organize and everyone who shared. It's really, I think just hearing experiences from other people is it's inspired. It's like, oh, we need to be talking more and like, you know, getting some of these resources. So thank you all for sharing. And Ray, I'm just excited to see that equity component being worked and y'all considering that. I'm Emily Horton, she, her pronouns. I'm with the Department of Health on this call with Lauren Tambor, who is from Ecology. And we both work on the Safer Products for Washington program, which works to get toxic chemicals out of consumer products. The program's administered by Ecology in consultation or collaboration with the Department of Health. And I think what we're starting to really try and flesh out our kind of equity and EJ work and community engagement, and also just kind of like getting some, it's a newer program, so getting kind of baseline public outreach things going. And one of our most recent efforts that we wanted to share with you all that might be of interest was thinking about how to make public engage a broader diverse audience in our public comment process when we think that, you know, strategically. And so we kind of created a story map that kind of it's distilled a 300-page technical report, so people don't have to read that because most people won't lots of times unless you're, you know, from a certain sector, and paired that story map with a really short 4-question survey. Each question we asked, we knew exactly how we would apply that feedback and inform our decision-making processes, these sorts of things. So we rolled out that story map and survey, heard back from people, and now what our next step is, we want to try and when we do use surveys, really report back out to the public what we heard from them, thank them, and we met internally as a team to really discuss how are we going to really milk what we heard from people and report back to them to show accountability and transparency and how their input's being applied. So we kind of are launching this follow-up campaign to that public comment survey, and we'll pop in some links. It's like a multimedia bilingual campaign. We're doing like Spanish and English content. And we created, we have really talented designer who created these animated videos reporting back out to the public what we heard and summarizing that and like what we're doing about it. So I'm passing it over to Lauren real quick. Is there anything else you want to add there?
No, you covered it so well. I dropped some links in the chat, but we were excited to get the volume of the response we did, and just looking forward to hopefully reaching the people that took it with these materials to let them know we heard them and share how we're using the input.
It's really great. And I think, you know, that your focus on communication and how to communicate to the audience in the best way is so important. And I'm looking forward to looking at what you just shared. Does anybody have questions about this process? It's really great work, you guys. Thank you for sharing. And, you know, Washington just continues to be such an impressive state. You guys just do great work, and I'm always looking forward to hearing what you're up to.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Well, I mean, it's very heartfelt. And you know, a little bit of jealousy there. So why don't we open it up? And is there anything else that others are working on that you'd like to share? And I can go by region, but I want to just kind of give, you know, if somebody's like itching to say, oh, we're doing this thing and I want your feedback, now is a great time to raise your hand or just make yourself known. So, okay, good. We have Steve.
Oh, hi, everyone. So thanks, Pam. As well, thanks to Melissa for putting our little article about lead in aluminum cookware into the latest IC2 newsletter. That was really helpful. I just wanted to give folks an update that our paper is going to be published on May 2nd in the Journal of Exposure Science and Environmental Epidemiology. You obviously can't get to it yet, but if you just go to that link in the chat on May 2nd, you'll be able to find the latest paper. We're working really hard on a communication strategy right now. And one of the things maybe this group can help us with is that we're trying to learn more about domestic aluminum manufacture and domestic cookware manufacturing. We've learned that a nonprofit organization called NSF International has a standard in place that certifies low levels of lead and other toxic materials in aluminum and other cookware. And they told us that buyers for some big box retail stores and maybe the Cookware Association may have their own standards. So if anyone has any information about how, what sort of certifications might be available out there that we can share with consumers when it comes to purchasing safe aluminum cookware, we would really, really value that information. We're about to do some outreach to the aluminum industry and the cookware industry to find out, and my colleague Katie is doing some background research on that. But if anyone has any experience with that industry, we'd really appreciate hearing about that. And what's keeping many of us very busy right now is also considering that this lead contaminated aluminum cookware appears to be available for purchase throughout the United States. We have a number of stakeholders we're engaging with right now, everything from healthcare providers to business owners. So I'll just stop there, and if anyone has any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So thanks, Pam.
Sure. And Steve, a couple of us noted the link that you shared didn't open.
It won't yet.
So
it's not going to be live until May 2nd.
Okay.
So I'll share closer to the date, but I just happen to have that in front of me. So
thank you. Okay. So we're not all going crazy. That's great.
No. It will be open access. So there won't be a paywall there. So you should all be able to get to it.
Yeah. So Jonathan asks if lead is added intentionally to aluminum cookware, or is it a contaminant of the raw material?
Well, so we think that the issue is primarily associated with imported cookware from countries where scrap metal is used as the source of aluminum. There are many countries where they do what they call artisanal cookware manufacturing, where you'll have whole communities occasionally that are set up next to scrap yards and so on and so forth. And so they're taking anything that looks like aluminum, including, radiators and, aircraft parts or anything with aluminum, and basically melting it down in makeshift smelters. And then they will either form ingots from that aluminum and send it off for manufacture elsewhere, or they'll pour it directly into quite often sand molds. So the composition can be quite variable. We're just trying to find out if there's any way to distinguish between that sort of aluminum cookware and other aluminum cookware that you can buy in anywhere from like international markets to Bed Bath and Beyond or Costco. So hence, you know, because you can't tell whether aluminum cook pots contain lead, as far as we can tell, without doing like an XRF screening on it or taking a chunk of it and sending it to the lab. So anyway.
Right, yeah. And you mentioned Costco, and I wonder if you've had a chance to talk to them about, do you know, are they one of the organizations that has standards for their cookware?
Our initial conversation with NSF International suggested that they likely do, as does Target and a couple of others, but we're just starting those conversations now. You can find, if you go to the NSF International website, it's sort of like the safer choice of you know, for some products. They do list manufacturers who do abide by their standards. And I found photographs online from Costco of cookware sets with the NSF logo on them. So what we don't know is whether there are other standards beyond NSF Internationals at this stage.
Right. Al, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, but but Steve was kind enough to share some aluminum standards that send it over to us so we could look at them with our XRF, and then I got our results, and then I went online and looked at all the certifications from labs on the content, and I was amazed at how many of these standard numbered aluminum samples had apparently intentional lead in them in hundreds or higher parts per million, which really made me start wondering about what should be recycled in aluminum. How well is that known? What are current standards in the US, let alone other countries? It was a little, you know, there's a lot to talk about there, and I just I don't know. You don't have to go into it too much, but I was very curious about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot there. And so again, thank you for, you know, doing such great research and for sharing, you know, your findings. And I mean, everything that we're hearing is work that the rest of us can be learning from and leveraging. There's some interesting communication in the chat, but I think you guys have that fairly well covered. And I wanted to just give others a chance to share what they're up to with respect to equity. So is there anyone else on the West Coast, California? Do you have something that you want to talk about? Whoever it is who feels like they are California.
Well, can I just say,
yes.
I have to go to another meeting, but we do have a webinar coming up, and I'm sorry I've forgotten when it is, Melissa or Pam.
With the Healthy Building Network?
Right, the results of the project that was done in low-income housing here in Minneapolis on safer building products. So I just want to put in a plug for that, and hope people can attend.
Do you know when that is, Melissa?
Yes, June 9th. And I have that on like the last slide I'll share with everyone has that date on there, but everyone should have received an invite for that, and I'll send a reminder out. But the Healthy Building Network is planning on sending us some pre-meeting materials in the next week. So as soon as I get those from them, I will send those on to everyone.
Great, thank you. So yeah, we have, 17 minutes left. I actually am going to have to hop off a little before 4:30, but I would love for other states to share. Let me just kind of flip us over to the East Coast. Is there anything happening in New York that anybody would like to share?
Hey, this is Pam.
Hey,
Can you hear
Pam.
me?
Yep.
So, I would say all of our chemical policy work would benefit underserved and vulnerable populations, but the area where our most intentional focus on equity and environmental justice is currently in the work that we're doing on climate. So we have a Climate Act in New York State that actually requires us to invest resources to ensure that disadvantaged communities receive at least 35%, with a goal of 40% of the overall benefits of spending on clean energy programs and investments in pollution reduction and a whole host of things. So we're sort of taking on legislatively making sure that we're directing state funding towards disadvantaged communities. So I think that's probably the biggest area that I can think of to highlight, because honestly, everything that we do to reduce pollution is benefits everybody. So I don't know.
No, that's good. Thanks. Chuck, is Chuck Ruffing still here? Just curious if there's anything going on in your organization that maybe you wanted to share. We don't get to hear from you as often.
Yeah, Pam. Nothing. We are focused a lot on the climate work that Pam's mentioned, and we are attempting in the communication front to tailor a bunch of programs towards underserved communities and kind of take a lot of what is already known about things like bleach substitution, for example, and just give a megaphone to some of the efforts and some targeted communications out there instead of just posting it on our website, to actually try to get at these communities in a more focused effort.
Great, thank you.
So, and just on the funding front, besides the Climate Act, just last week in our state budget, we they passed approval for a bond act, an environmental clean water, clean air, and Green Jobs Bond Act that's going to authorize $4.2 billion for a host of programs, including air pollution reduction, clean water, investing in a green schools initiative that's going to make sure that public school buses are located in disadvantaged communities. So we're really taking a look at all of that funding stuff. So that was just another thing that it was authorized by our state budget, but it has to be voted on in November. And if it passed, then it's going to mean that New York State is legally required to really pay attention to how we're all of our programs are interacting with and benefiting disadvantaged communities. So it's good stuff.
Excellent. So Michelle, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So this is Michelle Romero-Fitchback from Safer Consumer Products in California. And I have to say that our group is very much committed to this work. We have internal teams working on equity, on diversity, inclusion, environmental justice, a very long list of to-do items. I actually been in contact with Farah. I believe we have invited you previously to talk to us too. We are currently working on different projects. We are reviewing our AA guide. We're trying to also incorporate some environmental justice perspective into our AA guide. We're currently doing some internal work, we submitted a proposal. Hopefully we will get some additional work, technical work to review this guide. We have a DTSC-wide community science work group. We are looking at how we can adopt some of the community science guidelines from EPA into the group, into the work that we're doing at DTSC. At SCP, there are individual projects already going on, looking at different exposures in tribes, in underrepresented communities. We're trying to work harder in terms of incorporating an EJ lens and other societal considerations into our research projects, and start working on that early on. But as of this time, we have multiple things getting started. We have very preliminary work right now. Or at least, this is Michelle Romero Fishback, Jean. I'm a senior environmental scientist with Safer Consumer Products. Yeah, so we just wanted to share that we're working on it. We have multiple lines of work. We have multiple projects, and hopefully in the near future, we will be able to share more specific details about all the stuff that we're doing.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have a project that they want to mention? We've got a few minutes before we're done, and I want to give Melissa time to kind of talk about some of the things that are coming up. Anybody else have a project they want to share, talk about before we move on?
Hey, Pam, I was just going to say, King County is also working on kind of like a variety of things. So I appreciate Michelle mentioning that there's all kinds of stuff going on, but it does kind of make me think of the value of kind of creating a space or venue for sharing that information. So, as Michelle's agency's work, proceeds, and having a space to provide updates or what's interesting, lessons learned, that kind of thing would be great. And I kind of feel in a similar situation where I don't want to take up a bunch more time, but we're just kind of trying to essentially organize all of our work through a racial equity lens. And so everything from how we measure our service delivery, decide what projects are being used on, community engagement approach, it's becoming more and more fundamental, but then the devil's in the details to how to actually live up to kind of the mission values and actually implement these things. So anyway, just thanks for sharing, Michelle, and please stay connected and give us updates about all the projects you were talking about.
Yeah, I agree. It's really important, and clearly there is a lot of really powerful work going on. And I see Terry. I was wondering what Turi is up to, and I have to say Turi is far, far, far behind on a lot of this. And I really don't have anything interesting to share with everybody other than that we have a new director who has a very keen interest and background in human rights as it relates to exposures to toxic chemicals. And so I expect that we will be doing more in that area as his influence and his vision starts to really play out. But I don't really have anything specific to add. I wonder if anyone else has anything they'd like to be sharing before we let Melissa move us on. Well, I will just say that I am very inspired by all of the work that you all are doing. Carl, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a link to the Toxics Reduction and Equity study that Metro did with many of you on this call and others in the IC2. And so you can check out that link. It provides a little bit of a framework and some data to support the importance of all this work. And And good going, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and doing the work you're doing.
Thank you. All right. I'm actually going to need to step away now, but Melissa, thank you for taking over, and it's really great to see you all.
Well, thank you, Pam, for facilitating. You do such a great job. We'll try not to ask you every time.
It's okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
And thanks to Farah and everyone else that presented and shared. This was it was so great to see everyone using the chat and sharing all the resources and tips. I will make sure that we get that all pulled together for everyone. For those that can access Teams, I think you could pull it out yourself, but I'm going to put that together into a Word doc for everyone. And I know that there are some folks that were not able to attend today, so we are recording the meeting today so that they can have that. And as soon as we get the new website up and running, we'll be able to have more events like this up there for everyone to access in the member section. I just wanted to share just a few of the upcoming events. All member meetings for May and July. The executive committee is working on the agenda for those meetings now. And as Al mentioned, we will have a presentation on June 9th from the Healthy Building Network with work that they did in Minnesota. So that's really exciting. That is being built right now, that presentation. And as I said, we'll have more information about that very soon from the presenters. And before we leave, is there anything else that Farah that you wanted to share, or anything else to wrap up, or we can let people go a couple minutes early? Either way.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you all to coming to the roundtable. I think it's been a really great opportunity to share, and we're getting some clarity and momentum around our equity work group. So we hope to, do more of these, and also please feel free to reach out to us if you have some thoughts about some of that survey work that we did, and if there are any other areas you'd really like to see. And please, that June 9th meeting where Healthy Building Network will be there is going to be great. So I encourage you to come to that too.
Great. And as I mentioned, we do usually meet at this time. There's no obligation to attend every meeting. If people want to just pop into some of them, when we do have an agenda, we do try to share that ahead of time as much as possible, just so that you can see what we will be discussing. So just connect with me or Farah if you'd like more information. And great. Thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Melissa.